Hey everybody, welcome to another video here on the 67 Mustang channel. So let's get in and talk about instruments, gauges, and whatnot. Also show you a little something I did to back up at least one of the gauges on here. So yeah, let's get in here and take a look, shall we? Okay, so we're here in the car, looking at instrument cluster. Now, the speedo over here has been working fine. What was an ammeter, I replaced it with a voltmeter that I got from, was it Cougar Innovations? Anyway, I'll share the link down in the description below. But they basically take the stock ammeter, convert it to a voltmeter, which I had to do when I rewired the car, and I put that one wire alternator in and the American Autowire harness. So that gauge has been working. And again, speedo, as I said, been working. What hasn't been working is the temperature gauge right there, the oil pressure gauge right there, and of course the fuel gauge over here. So those are all, important. The temp gauge over here, the actual sniper, the sniper unit here display when it's cranked has a temperature reading on it, so wasn't as concerned about that. I can track it. Now that I have the oil pressure gauge under the hood, that gives me a backup, right, to see what I'm getting there. But it's hard when you're driving the car. You can't be looking under the hood. Okay, so as you may know, the oil pressure gauge in the car is not working. We're going to work on that here today. But anyway, before that, one of the things I've done, and I've seen this done by several others on YouTube, and ignore this wire here that goes to the temperature sensor. We'll show that in a second. But I've installed a mechanical gauge up under here so I can get a more exact reading on the oil pressure for the engine. This is the same gauge I'm using up here for the fuel pressure for the EFI system. So it's that Marshall gauge. It'll go up to 100 psi. Not that this should get anywhere close. I have found since I installed this that it starts off at about 50 psi. Once the engine gets up to temp, it goes down to between 30 and 40 psi in there. So I think we're getting good oil pressure. Of course, I thought we were originally, and because the engine was running fine. But to do this, let's see if I can get you down in here and you can kind of see. I loop you down so you can see the parts I've used. So I have a pipe threaded extension. Whoops. Let's get my fingers up in, there we go. So there's a pipe thread extension that goes into the block, goes into this T here. And I think this is 1/4 inch. I'll have to verify. 1/4 inch there. Anyway, it's the same as what this is. So this is the main sending unit that goes back to the gauge on the instrument cluster here. And then I've got a adapter here that goes, I think, down to 1/8 of an inch, something like that, for the gauge to go into here. So all of this is pipe thread, so it all goes in fairly easy. I got the parts at Ace Hardware. You can probably get them at Home Depot or Lowe's or wherever. They're nothing, it's just pipe fittings. Okay, so that's what I've done to create this T to get this oil pressure gauge put in here. So I thought it was pretty cool. I'll bring you out here. So now, we had to put the temperature sensor back in there for the EFI, right? So I guess I didn't have, but that's where I put the temperature sensor for the EFI, because that's where everybody else that I'd seen on YouTube and whatnot installing it. So for the inside the car gauge, I've relocated the stock sensor up there near the thermostat. So you can see that's in there. I've got the wire, that's that wire you were looking at there, run. I'll eventually, once I get the gauge working, work it in the wire loom so it's nice and pretty and all that. But we've done that so far. Okay, so just wanted to show you all that before we get started on the gauges. So let's go into the car now. There, so it'd be nice. And of course, knowing how much gas you have is nice. So those aren't working. They haven't been working since I rewired the car. So I need to get those working. I actually spent some time last weekend and got the fuel gauge where I think it's working, but these others, the oil pressure and temperature over here, are not working still. So I'm going to have to pull the instrument cluster out, and then we're going to do some testing on some things and see if what I did to fix the fuel gauge works on those as well. Now, to pull this out, if you've never pulled an instrument cluster out, it's not that hard. So what you really need to do, or at least this is the way I do it, is for the speedo here, there is a mechanical connection in the back of it. There's a big nut back there you just have to back off to disconnect the speedo cable. Now, to get to that, I have found you've got to take out the vent controls here, which is simple. You got the 2 screws up here, and then there's 2 screws down here at the bottom that have to come out, and then this just kind of flops out. Then you can reach your hand back in here, back through the hole that's now created with this out of the way, and back and unscrew the cable to the speedo. Now you want to, whoops, had my arm on the horn. Woo, scared me. Anyway, sorry about that. You probably want to put a catch bucket underneath the car and the transmission, because that cable goes from here back through the firewall, under the car, and into the transmission, where it picks up the revolutions, and that's how it knows how fast you're going. Anyway, but wiggling that around, I had some leaks come out of the transmission because of that. So I now have a bunch of cat litter under there, because I got probably about a third of a quart, a quarter to a third of a quart leak out from that. Okay. So anyway, once you get that undone, then you want to come and undo the screws. So you have 1 screw here, and then there's 3 screws, 1, 2, and then a third one here that have to come out. And then at the base of each one of these gauges, at the bottom center, is another screw. So there's 6 screws total that have to come out. Once you get those out, then this should pull out enough for you to go in and disconnect your wiper switch, and then the other connections to the gauges themselves, right? They're just plugs in there to do. So I'm going to go ahead and do all of this, get this out, and then we'll try to set up where we can look at the gauges from the back side and see if we can figure out what the problem is. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. Here we go. We got her out. So now let's go over here and test. Okay, so here we are looking at the back of the instrument cluster. This is the speedo. This is where the ammeter / voltmeter is. That's the oil pressure gauge. That's the temperature gauge. and this over here is the fuel gauge. This thing right here, where this is coming in, then this is a relay step down. I don't know what you want to call it, but it takes 12 volts in, which comes in from here, runs it through here, and comes out between 5 and 6 volts over here. So we want to check and make sure that this is actually working. This is grounded here, so it's grounded through the backing here. I forget what this is called. Anyway, the back of the instrument cluster, this is all metal, and this is what's used for ground. Actually, these screws here, so this tab right here, let's see if I can show it to you. This tab here, and there's the same one over here where I've got this alligator clip. That is what grounds this unit to the chassis. So you've got to make sure there's a good ground connection here and here when it's in the car. Right now, for the sake of testing, I've got it grounded off of 1. I could do 2, and I'm using my battery backup, or not battery, my jump box over there as power for the testing here. So what I've done is I've got my positive and negative. I've got my alligator clips that run through. I've grounded here to this tab, and I've put my power to the power that comes in here. Now, again, remember, I've done the American Autowire harness here, so this is not a stock wiring configuration. But let's trace this out. So this brown wire here, right, it runs up through this, mess up through here, then comes up into here. And this is going to deliver 12 volts of power. Runs through the relay here. Now this is, again, a new one. This is the solid state version. There's a mechanical version. I didn't have any luck with that, so I went to the solid state version here. You can get from National Parts Depot, CJ Pony Parts, any Mustang store, whatever. Very common on Fords of this era. And then it's going to come out here at that reduced voltage, like I said, 5 to 6 volts, somewhere in there. That then feeds into the fuel gauge. Now again, with the American Autowire, it daisy chains. So I've got this clipped in, and this wire comes across over through here, and then daisy chains into the fuel pressure here. And then that follows up this wire here and goes into the temperature gauge over here. So that's providing the basic power to the gauge. Now the way these gauges work is through resistance, right? So you'll notice on this one there's a separate wire that comes off here that comes back into this harness right here. The same with the oil pressure. It's got this blue wire that again runs into here. And then this one has the green wire again that runs back over here. So what happens is the sending units on the car, so let's take the oil pressure one for example. The oil pressure sending unit sends a certain amount of resistance back through that wire, which with the power coming in, it takes the resistance, and that's how it's showing or displaying the pressure sensor. At least that's how I understand it. I could be wrong. Again, keep in mind, I'm not a mechanic. I'm not an electrician. So I'm doing my best to guess. So let's do some quick testing. I'm going to try to set you up in a way you can see what's going on, because I can't really do this one-handed. So let me get you set up here as we run through the testing. Okay, hopefully y'all can see what's going on. It's hard to do this in where I'm at, but okay, so what I've done, I showed you I've hooked this up to my booster pack here. So first thing I want to do is make sure that I'm actually getting at least 12 volts over here to this relay step down. So I'm going to take my multimeter, I'm setting it down to 12 volts here. And again, if I'm wrong in how I'm doing this, somebody let me know. So I'm going to take my ground, hook it in here to this, and then I'm going to come over here, and I'm not sure if you can see that, but I'm getting 13.29 volts here. So that's good. So now I'm going to come over here to this other side, and I said I should be getting 6 to 5 to 6, I'm getting 5.54 volts. So that's good. That means this relay is doing its job. It's stepping down the voltage like it's supposed to. So what I want to check is going out to each one of these, am I getting the right voltage? And again, I'm doing my best. So I'm going to check here at this, and I'm getting 5.5. It's kind of jumping around because my hands aren't steady, but 5.5 there. Let's see what I'm getting over here at the, getting 5.5 there and 5.5 there. Okay, so we know the voltage is coming across the daisy chain. So it's going from here to here, so that's good. So that may mean that something is wrong on this other side, which is acting sort of as a ground. Okay, yep, see, so I'm getting 5.5 there. What am I getting over here? Wow, I'm getting ridiculous numbers over here. It's like 159.1. So something is telling me I'm probably grounding out. Yep, I've got to be, yep, grounding out across that. So now what had happened here with the gas gauge is I found out the gauge wasn't properly seated in the slot here for it, and that it was actually touching the housing, casing, whatever this is, here and causing ground. So I'm suspecting that's probably happening over here as well. So I'm going to disconnect the power. I'm going to loosen these gauges up and see, because I think with no real, I mean, I don't think I should be getting, well, I know I should not be getting that number over here. So, and the gauge, the temperature gauge was pegging all the way out to hot when I put the key to on. So I'm going to check that out here, undo those and see what happens if I can readjust those and see if we seem to get better readings. Okay, I think I've got things figured out here. I adjusted the temperature gauge in the housing, this part here, till it was seated in a way that should keep it from grounding out. So what I think was happening is the back of the gauge was touching the back of the housing, grounding the gauge to the housing, which it's not supposed to do. The gauge is supposed to get its ground from the sending unit for the individual gauge. So for the fuel gauge, that's the sending unit that's in the tank. For the oil pressure gauge, that's the oil pressure sending unit. And for the temperature gauge, that would be the temperature sending unit. Obviously, that's where the gauges get the ground. They're not supposed to get it from the housing itself. So with that, based on what I understand, I should be getting the same reading on both posts for that gauge as far as voltage, because there's no resistance. That sending unit provides ground and resistance on the circuit, which is how the gauge determines what it's supposed to show. Okay, so I've got my battery pack hooked up, and I want to test again to make sure I've got good, good voltage coming in. So I've got my multimeter turned on, sorry guys, to check for 12 volts. I'm going to go into over on this side of the relay, make sure I'm getting 12 to 13. I'm getting 13.5 volts there. Now on this side, again, somewhere around 6 volts should be coming off on this side. I'm getting 6.7 there, so we're okay there. That's stepping down like it's supposed to. So again, we're going to go to the fuel gauge over here and see what I'm getting. I'm getting 6.7 there. Now I should, on this side, also get 6.7 if I'm understanding this correctly, and I am. Okay, so that seems good. So I'm going to go to the oil pressure gauge, see what I'm getting here. Again, 6.7. Go to the other side of the oil pressure gauge, 6.7. Going to this side, 6.7. And this side, I'm getting 6.7. So I'm getting 6.7 all the way across. I was getting like 120, 150 over here on the temperature gauge originally. So I think that is where that was grounding out. So I think if I've tested everything correctly, and that's a big if, that I should have everything good here. So the next step is to go put it back in the car and see if I get the proper readings in the car. So I'm going to go put this in and test it out, and if it works, I'll show it to you. Okay, so test the gauges, got things reinstalled. Everything looks pretty good. I've verified that I'm getting voltage up to the sending units. That's in line with what's coming out of the gauges. So let's see what happens. Okay. It looks like our fuel gauge, which I thought I had had working before, is coming up. It's going to come up to about 3/4 of a tank, which again fits with what I think is there. Oil pressure gauge is not budging at all, and I know I've got oil pressure because I've got that gauge under the hood, and it's reading good. And temperature gauge looks like it's sort of moving. It was, I think, back closer to the C, and it's coming up, so maybe it's sort of working. So either the oil pressure gauge is shot, which is possible, or the new sending unit I put on is not working. I'm going to leave that for another day. I said luckily I have another way to get the temperature right. That's one of the nice things about the Holley Sniper. You can see where it's that 180, that's the temperature. So that's good. Yes, I have been running the car some, testing things out. I would expect the temperature gauge there to read a little higher if it was indeed 180, but again, I don't know. And I've got the oil pressure under the hood, which we'll go out and check real quick. Okay, get my light. So if you look back down in there, you can see, yep, 40 PSI. Seems good, so now I've got oil pressure. Just check. Oil pressure looking good. So with that, I'm not sure what I'm going to do. Like I said, because I've got other ways, other gauges, I'm kind of okay. I do need to mount this somewhere down in here. But like I said, the fuel gauge is working now, or at least appears to be. I'm going to keep watching it, but that's been a big concern because I have no other way of knowing what it's doing and how much gas I've got, and that seems to be working. Speedometer works fine. I've tested it with my GPS. They seem lined up well, so I'm good there. Again, charging for the alternator, I replaced that ammeter gauge with the voltmeter, and it seems to be working. And of course, I've got it also on here, so I know that's good. So yeah, is it critical? No. Would it be nice to have? Yes. I just don't know. I honestly don't know what I'm going to do at this point. So we'll see. I know there's some options. I've looked at some of the Dakota digital gauges that look really cool, but those are like $1,200, so those are kind of expensive. I am looking probably to go ahead and upgrade the radiator on here because, when I first got it started, it had a leak and whatnot. I kind of sealed it up, but I would like to get something nicer in there, an aluminum one maybe, because eventually I am putting air conditioning on this car, at least I want to, as well as power steering, which can put more load on the engine. So again, additional cooling I think would be beneficial. But right now, like I said, these are all minor things. as far as I'm concerned. So we'll see. Love to get y'all's opinion on where I ought to go next. I do think I do have some universal joints. I really haven't looked at those, the ones that are on here now. Of course, still have the leak in the transmission, which has some seals I've got to do. Again, not a major leak, but still something to look at. And then would probably, I don't know, maybe wheel bearings. I mean, they don't seem bad, but again, who knows when they were last replaced? Who knows? Yeah, I don't. So maybe we'll do some of that. I am thinking about doing the rear, changing out the oil on the rear axle. We did check it, but that was months ago. It seemed okay at that point, but now that I'm really putting her on the road and driving her, maybe, I think doing that would be good. I'm not seeing any sign that the seals are leaking, which is good, but I may replace some of those too. I don't know. Anyway, again, give me your ideas. Would love to hear them. So anyway, again, thanks for watching. I hope you liked it. If you did, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't, you can dislike it if you've installed that, because I think YouTube stopped that. But anyway, and we'll see where we go from here. So with that, guys, thank y'all, and I'll see y'all in the next video.